Welcome to the Swing Left Nebraska podcast that's all about energizing communities, advocating for change, and making a difference in the great state of Nebraska. We'll dive deep into the heart of Nebraska's progressive movement, exploring the stories, strategies, and initiatives that are shaping the political landscape. We're here to amplify the voices of candidates, local activists, and community leaders who are fighting for a more equitable, inclusive, and prosperous Nebraska. Swing Left Nebraska is your go to resource for staying informed about key issues, upcoming elections, and how you can get involved. Whether you're a seasoned organizer, a concerned citizen, or someone who's looking to make a difference for the first time, we've got you covered. Get ready to be inspired and let's embark on this incredible journey together. Welcome. My name is Leia, and I am so glad you are here to check out my conversation with Cindy Maxwell Osdek as she helps us unpack the Unicameral Special Session Week 2. We have a lot to get into, so let's do a show. Sydney, welcome back to the Swing Left Nebraska podcast. We are unpacking the special session, week number 2. Here we are. I know you have a lot of updates for us because you went down there and even testified. I know our audience is curious to hear all your insights and all your feedback. So let's just start from the beginning. Can you just give us an overview of what this week was about and maybe talk to us about what you testified about?
I'm really glad to be talking with you today. Thank you. As a refresher, the governor, starting with the end of last regular session, had promised or threatened, whichever way you want to word it, that he would call a special session this summer. And we crisscrossed across the state and had his town halls and was in the paper quite a bit. He never did come to Omaha or Lincoln, though, to discuss property taxes or some of these other issues. He made his constitutionally required call for special session. It's called a proclamation. He made that the day before the senators were supposed to show up last Thursday, the 25th. And in the 1 week since, it has been a wild ride. The senators gavelled in on Thursday and had bill introduction for 2 days. Speaker Arch had said that they would be in session last Saturday to do bill introduction, but the drafters were just overwhelmed with the large number of bills and constitutional amendments. So he postponed the session for a day, not come back till last Monday. And so the last of bill introduction took place on Monday, and they started with hearings on Tuesday. And there were 81 bills and 24 constitutional amendments that had been introduced. And all of those hearings have now taken place. It was all very fast. And many of the hearings were held the day after they were announced on the floor of the legislature. So it was really difficult for people to get off work or find childcare or to drive to Lincoln to testify. And I think that the senators are hopefully listening to a lot of people that are maybe calling or sending emails directly to try to reach them because they could not have a clear picture from the second house about our views on these issues because there just wasn't enough time for people to participate. And I just think that's really disappointing that they're trying to really work on such large topics and such far reaching changes to our budgeting process and tax revenue process in our state and doing it in such a haphazard manner. This is a lame duck session and it was called at the last minute and it's just been rushed. And it's all very unnecessary for them to be doing it this way.
You still managed to find the time to testify. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. With our legislative study group, we live stream and record the floor proceedings and the hearings. My husband and I actually had a family funeral in Hastings this week. And I had intended on going straight there on Tuesday. And I was driving by Lincoln when they were ending the appropriations hearing. And I really got as I was listening to the hearing on the road. And so I actually just drove to the Capitol and I was able to get in. I was the last person to testify in appropriations. And I testified basically in neutral position, but asked the senators to just really consider our vulnerable neighbors. These cuts that are being proposed are really alarming. They are actually making proposals to cut things that the senators just budgeted in the regular session in the spring. And Senator Kavanaugh had actually testified in appropriations on Tuesday and basically said that there were department heads who were not consulted about these budget cuts, the ones who were working on it as the budget was even going through the regular process. So it's just really irregular. And it's not the way we're supposed to conduct business in our state. I think that some of the senators were concerned. They kept asking the department heads, like during their testimony, they would say, now, is this something the governor discussed with you? Or had you been approached or had you been consulted? And department head after department head said no. And I just think that a lot of Nebraskans, of course, want the senators to be careful and find a way to help struggling property owners who have just really high taxes that they're on maybe fixed income or it's just become out of balance. But I don't think a lot of Nebraskans understand that the way they're going to finance some of these tax cuts for large, wealthy property owners is going to be achieved with cuts to things like behavioral health care or assistance programs. There's huge cuts coming that they're proposing to Health and Human Services and foster care review office. We're just recently recovering from the privatization of foster care and all the dangerous outcomes that we had with that St. Francis ministry. So it's really alarming. One that really sticks out to me in the hearing for LB2 and 3 in appropriations was Secretary Ednan. He's the Secretary of State, and he was talking about the proposed cuts to his budget for current things that have been allocated towards the upcoming voter ID implementation in the general election. It just doesn't make sense. I feel like there's a lot of people that would really be surprised by the cuts that have been suggested. So if you've not had a chance yet to either read through LB2 and 3 or to watch the hearing, please take some time and then call your senator and tell them that this is just not what we want.
Exactly. It's definitely not what we want. So you testified. What exactly did you speak on? What did you say to the senators?
I just said there wasn't enough time for Nebraskans to get to the hearing. It had just been announced the day before. There was just really no way for there to be good overview about how Nebraskans would be viewing this and that we would want them to watch out for our vulnerable neighbors. There were a lot of people that testified on the revenue side, the LB1, the tax bill proposed by the governor or at the governor's request, Senator Linehan's bill in Revenue Committee. It went all day, like literally all day. And the format she chose was a little bit different. I'd never seen this before, but they had people testify first as a proponent, then as an opponent, and then neutral, like not in chunks of 1 hour sections, but just one after another. So I guess at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they ran out of proponents. And so the rest of the day was just opponent. They had opponent like the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce or really large business organizations and well respected agriculture representation. It was just from all corners and a lot of small businesses that will be impacted by these increases. One of the things that I was really interested in just recently is that someone had said when we had this big storm, and that impacted people's station too. We had this large storm come through Nebraska and there were so many people dealing with power outages and fell trees in their yards and blocking the streets. And a lot of people didn't get to Lincoln to testify. But people that did were sharing how this is going to really impact their small businesses. And one of the things that someone had pointed out online is that just even recovering from the storm, all of the various construction or remodeling or people getting ready for school, they were talking about how you're going to have to pay taxes on haircuts. And one gentleman, I'll never forget, he was talking about the increases to tax on pet care, like for veterinarians, but they're not increasing or putting taxes on veterinarian expenses for like farm animals. But he said it will be very detrimental potentially to human health because there's so many people that have pets that if they can't get them to the vet for care, there's some diseases that can be passed from your pets to humans. And so it's just really long range impacts that they should be trying to keep that more in mind. I'm not saying that we don't need to work on the issue regarding property tax. There needs to be something done, but many of those proposals are not it.
So, what do you think we can expect for this upcoming week?
It's interesting. Speaker Arch changed the schedule. He said that revenue and appropriations have so much work to do after these days long hearings that they had all week. And so he said that they're not going to convene till Wednesday. So they're going to take Monday and Tuesday to do their work and then gavel in on Wednesday afternoon and take up some gubernatorial appointments and then start debate on the tax and appropriations packages on Thursday. He said the senators should plan to work late Thursday and Friday and possibly a full day on Saturday. It's really interesting because I don't know how these senators are going to decide which things they would exempt or continue exemption on the tax piece. One of the interesting things they were talking about were these quote unquote sin taxes on things like spirit. There was a proposed increase on alcohol that will really impact like bottles of spirits, distilled spirits here in our state. And so there were people that were also talking about how this is going to be very difficult when you consider the taxes on deciding is candy or not, or is it when you talk about vaping and cigarettes, or when you talk about gambling, those gambling bills were really well attended for such short notice. And even Coach Osborne attended. Senator Wayne and Senator McKinney had proposed increasing revenues by legalizing marijuana. And that would be one way to try to increase revenues in our state. I know that there's so much opposition to that. I have a hard time imagining that the senators will seriously consider it. I'm not sure what's going to happen this week. When you talk about the appointment, there was a kind of interesting hearing in Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs this week because they had a lot of appointments that were considered in the hearings. And one was the new CIO, and he's been functioning as an interim CIO, and his appointment hearing was this week. But just the day, I think, of his hearing or the day before, he had sent out an email to all of the state employees in his division about taking time off to come and testify in support of Governor Pillen's proposal. That was really inappropriate use of state resources. And so that was something Senator Conrad and Raybould and Hunt in Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs, they really had a lot of questions about that. And he talked about how he self reported and called the Attorney General's office, I think, and the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission. And I'm not sure what's going to come of that, but it's just really not the way to start out your work on behalf of the state of Nebraska to be so partisan about something like that. And it's something he really should have realized that it's not appropriate use of state resources. And then we had in appropriations, HHS Director Corsi, who worked for Epiphany Consulting as Epiphany Consulting was being hired by the state of Nebraska when he was going through his appointment and confirmation process last spring. And that Epiphany Consulting is the one that has the 10 million no bid contract with the state. And they were in appropriations talking about how they would be cutting and recommend hundreds of millions of dollars cut from the state budget overall, if you were going to talk in the overview, but that somehow they're going to improve services. It was long on talk, but short on details. I guess I'll just put it that way. I think that what's going to happen is these senators will come back after the revenue committee work to try to come up with a package, and they'll have to match it up, of course, with appropriations. And I just don't see how they get the numbers and the math to work. There's actually, I think, been some mistakes with some of the fiscal projections. And then in the Nebraska Examiner, they had talked in the past that there was some math that wasn't added. So I'm not sure how they're going to get this done. Treasurer Breezy came and testified the other day on LB1, and he thinks it's great. He said, yes, pass LB1, and then also take on K through 12 funding for the state. That is a very large change to how we would approach funding of our public education. And it seems to me that there's a lot of concern that this would not be the way to do it. We're just still coming off of being one of the lowest in the country up until last year with funding of public schools from the state. And I think there's just a lot of hesitancy and concern that we would just not follow through in a way that would make sure that our local districts would have what they need. For each community is so different, and local control is something that most Nebraskans just have rock solid belief that we should keep local control. So I think it's important if you could just ask everyone to make sure and get in touch with their senators and tell them that we want them to work on these things, but to do it in a careful and measured way and not with this lame duck chaotic session.
Yes, I agree.
Senator Raybold had, and so did Senator Blood, I believe, regarding holding or putting on hold the income tax rate cuts that are being phased in. And then Senator Day had a bill to, was it to sell the governor's plane or to ground the plane or somehow not be spending so much on travel by the governor. And Senator John Kavanaugh had a bill that would offer property tax relief to all Nebraskans up to a certain amount, which would really target towards Nebraskans who are vulnerable and struggling, maybe on a fixed income. There were some really good ideas. I'm just not sure what they're going to end up moving forward with.
More to be revealed, right?
One of the things, I'm not sure if you had seen the tally about the cost of the special session, but Americans for Prosperity, which is a conservative organization, had put out a tally that shows you continuously how much the special session has cost. So far, as of 11 a.m. on Sunday, it was over 188,000.
Oh my gosh. What are those costs from?
There's people working overtime at the legislature to get this work done.
Mhm.
In fact, bill drafters worked all weekend to get all of these bills and constitutional amendments ready for the legislature to be read across. I'm concerned because one of the things the governor had proposed were cuts to the legislature. This balance of power and authority is really out of whack right now. And the governor proposed cuts and did not discuss it with the executive board. That came out in the appropriations hearing the other day. And one piece I'm concerned about, of course, I believe that our legislative staff should be paid appropriately and for the work they do. But I'm also concerned that they would cut projects. Like, of course, I'm very excited about the upcoming digital archive of the broadcast from Nebraska Public Media. And Senator Brewer's bill is slated to go into effect in January. I'm hoping that there won't be any cuts to that project. We did see the result, a little bit of some of the work they've done on that with actual committee hearings now having a closed caption. So that's been really nice watching the hearings and seeing that closed caption roll out. And it's really something that a lot of people will benefit from.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our audience with?
I think it was great that you were talking just a little bit ago about how there have been a lot of young people registering to vote. And it excited me when I was thinking about how there's so many students coming back to school here when you talk about high school students or new college students. And I'm hoping everybody listening will be reaching out to all of your friends and relatives and neighbors, making sure that everyone's registered to vote and ready for the upcoming election. There's a lot of really important elections coming up in the legislature for sure. And I just want to make sure that everyone is prepared and can hopefully help us get the best people.
Yes, and 17-year-olds who turn 18 before November 5th can register right now. So, yes, that's a good reminder. And make sure you do check your voting status. I will make sure to put that link in the show notes just to make sure everything's good to go, that you're still registered, nothing's changed, nothing wonky happened. I always check mine once or twice a year just to make sure everything's good to go. You don't want any surprises day of. And I'm always a big proponent of mailing my ballot in early. That's just the way I prefer to do it. I like to have my ballot at home so I can really take the time to study it. And then I either drop it in a Dropbox, mail it in the mailbox. You have till October 25th to submit that application. They start sending out early mail ballots as early as September 30th. Just around the corner, we'll be able to start making our voices heard. You can go to your county election commission website. Go to your county commission election website to find the link for a mail in ballot. You do have to complete one for the general election, even if you did complete one for the primary.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Sydney, as always, you do such a good job of really breaking down the complexity of the legislator, helping us unpack everything, especially in this special session. It can get a little murky. So thank you for helping us understand what's going on and doing such a good job of making everything easy to digest. We really appreciate it. And I'll catch you next week.
Thank you.
Just a little friendly reminder to my listeners who probably don't need this reminder, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. As we approach the next election, take the time to educate yourself about the candidates and the issues. Make sure you're registered and, most importantly, show up to the polls. Your vote is your voice, and together we can make a difference. Thank you for joining us today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friends and family. Until next time, let's mobilize, let's take action, let's go.
Ready, set, go. Get ready to go.